spiritual food for thought. So today I'm going to talk about the fusion of walrus and basketballs. And you may be wondering if you just heard that right. Yes, it is the fusion of walrus and basketballs. But before you think I've lost my mind and run away, let me first put in context that this is talking about answering a fool according to his folly. Last time I touched a little bit on Proverbs 26 verses 4 and 5, which seem to be potentially contradictory. Proverbs 26:4 says, "Answer not a fool according to his folly, lest thou also be like unto him." And Proverbs 26 verse 5 says, "Answer a fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own conceit." So I touched kind of base on this last time and talked about that there's an appropriate way to answer a fool and an inappropriate way. And that's what I think that this is talking about. So a good example, because I said if you treat what a fool is presenting as if it is valid, then you're validating his foolish claim and you are becoming a fool like unto him. Howsoever, if you're able to reflect the foolishness of what the fool is saying back onto the fool, then you'll prevent him from being wise in his own conceit. So a great example of this would be when people say, well, what about the separation of church and state? When somebody asks me that, I don't answer that as if that is a valid question. Because what they're actually talking about when they talk about the separation of church and state is they're making an appeal to the Establishment Clause. So I do understand that the separation of church and state was mentioned in a letter that Mr. Thomas Jefferson had wrote, but my point is that if we actually look at the First Amendment, it's not there. We don't get our laws or our regulations for this country based on letters that, private citizens send. It's from what's actually in the Constitution and the amendments thereof. And the Establishment Clause is very different when we actually look at it compared to this idea of the separation of church and state. So rather than treating that question as if it is a valid question and therefore validating the fool and becoming a fool like them, as soon as I do that, I've essentially lost the argument if the separation of church and state is an actual valid thing. So what I would prefer to do is if somebody says, well, what about the separation of church and state? And I say, well, what about the fusion of walrus and basketballs? And you may think, well, what in the world? That's what I would also like them to think, and here's why. Basically, the Establishment Clause would forbid the establishment of an official religion in the United States and prohibit favoring one religion over another or even favoring religion over non-religion. That's all it is. They can't establish an official religion or pretty much make laws that would favor one instead of another. That's it. The part of the First Amendment that would actually pertain to this, what would be called the Establishment Clause, is Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. So, if we talk about that, what did we not see? We didn't see separation, we didn't see church, and we didn't see state, did we? What we saw was the and of. The and of are in the original document, absolutely, guaranteed. You can probably look in even greater context and find and, okay? But in that snippet there, the and of are there. What's not there? Separation, church, and state. Just like fusion, walrus, and basketballs are not there either. The and of are. So if somebody says, what about the separation of church and state? And I treat it as if it's valid, I've essentially lost the argument. Or lost an opportunity to accurately reason with somebody because I've treated their claim as if it is valid even though it's got nothing to do with anything if we're actually appealing back to the First Amendment on this. Therefore, I prefer to say, well, what about the fusion of walrus and basketballs? And they'll say, well, what are you talking about? I'll be like, I don't know, what are you talking about? And they'll be like, the separation of church and state. And I'll be like, yeah, the fusion of walrus and basketballs. They say, why would you say that? And I'm like, same reason you would. Separation, church, and state are nowhere to be found in there. Just like fusion, walrus, and basketballs are nowhere to be found in there. So again, this is just taking some current events, some things that we're actually experiencing in our lives here in America that actually affects the way that we live and the way that legislation is made and the way that people treat things. And I understand people like to use case law these days, and if you can get a judge to rule a certain way, then that kind of becomes a law, and we refer back to the case law. If they want to change things, there is a process. It's called making an amendment, okay? They can do it the right way if they want. But anyway, in light of Proverbs 26:4 and 26:5, and how to answer a fool, Appropriately, I think this is a great tangible expression, maybe, or example. Maybe you guys will disagree with me, but I think it hits home, and it kind of brings it up to a way that people can understand. If you treat a foolish claim, like the separation of church and state, as if it is valid, and you answer a fool like he's asking a real question, which he's not, then you become a fool like unto him. Howsoever, if you can reflect his foolishness upon him, and answer a fool according to his folly, then he won't be wise in his own conceit. He'll potentially have the opportunity to be like, well, why do I believe in a separation of church and state if separation church and state is not in there? And maybe go back and actually see what's written. Maybe not, because he's a fool, right? But it's an option anyway. Hopefully this helps. Hopefully you guys understood that. If not, let me know. Be blessed. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.